This is his true face. But few can see it. The gifted and the damned.
And welcome back to the Lodgers Sordid Cinemas Twin Peaks podcast. My name is Simon Howell. I'm joined, as always, by the fabulously talented Kate Rennebaum.
Hello, everybody.
We are guestless this week. We're riding solo, and I'm curious to see how many strange tangents we can limit ourselves to when we're on our own.
Oh, man, I have no idea. Definitely. It's one of those things where I think it's like something about April. It's that time of the month where all of my academic friends are just too busy to do a podcast about Twin Peaks. So we'll have to see if we can dig deep and find some good tangents to make up for it. Yeah.
And all my pals lately are like anti-fascist protesters that don't watch television, so I can't help you at all. I want to thank our round of recent guests, particularly Sarah and Jessica and Ricky. It's been a great few weeks on the podcast. I hope you all have enjoyed it very much, and I hope you all will enjoy it just as much when we ride Sans Extras. Mm-hmm. So before we go any further, a quick small correction to last week's episode. We did previously state that there were no gay characters on the show, which we actually previously contradicted in an episode prior, where we talked about Philip and the fact that he was, in love with a man, which, of course, doesn't strictly speaking make you gay necessarily, but it is perhaps a contradiction in things we've stated. So heaven forbid we make factual errors on the Lodgers. We try to stay.
There are so many. I feel like there's another one that I should point out that I feel bad about. Not only the fact that I totally had that wrong when I said there were no gay characters on the show, or maybe just not wrong entirely, but it's not completely correct either. Mm-hmm. But the other one, and I actually feel really bad about this. I'm embarrassed that I got this so wrong. Was I think I said more than once that the woman who played Sid, the legal assistant to the judge guy, was First Nations actress, and she is totally not. And I don't know where I had invented that in my head, and I am kind of embarrassed that I said that because it is totally not right, and I feel very bad about that. I'm not sure if that was something that I wanted to be the case or something, and so I just sort of invented it. I really don't know, but yes, it is definitely not right. So apologies for that.
It's okay. And our payroll has been docked accordingly. Anyway, before we get into the meat of things, once again, I just wanted to mention to everyone to visit sordidcinema.com/goombastomp.com if you like video games, and also to rate, review, etc. the stuff on iTunes. We always appreciate more feedback, even if you want to say mean things. At this rate, I'm ready for the mean. Totally ready for the mean. I can deal with it. So this week we are talking about episodes 5 and 6 of season 2. That is The Orchid's Curse, written by Harry Pullman and directed by Graham Clifford, and Demons, written by Harley Payton and Robert Engels, and directed by Leslie Lincoln Glatter, once again, who we mentioned last week. Yeah, so let's get into it.
Wait, Simon, before we start talking about the episodes, there's something I have been trying to remember to make time to talk about on the podcast for basically, 3 weeks now. I wanted to talk about it when we were doing the season 2 first episode, because I didn't even get time to mention this when we were talking about that episode, the Lynch directed episode, the 90-minute one. But that episode is structured so much as a throwback to the pilot of the show, period. You get a lot of references to the pilot. So something I found out about, this was actual original research. I did not just get this from another book.
Wait, are you calling this an exclusive?
This is one of those Twin Peaks, archaeological kind of research. This is what you get when you have a Harvard PhD student who has not enough time but has interestingly connected friends who can tell her cool things. I think 2 weeks ago, reading about one of these episodes, I came across a quote by somebody, I think somebody who had worked as a cameraman or something on Twin Peaks, who was quoted saying he had found out about the show when he had seen the pilot at the Telluride Film Festival almost a year before it played on television. And for viewers who don't know, I have worked at the Telluride Film Festival for 10 years, off and on. Simon has also been 1 year, which was super fun. But yes, I've worked there forever. And so I have friends who have been at the festival for, 30 years. And I reached out to one of them and asked if he remembered if Twin Peaks, the pilot, had played at the festival, because I had never heard this before. And I've read all of the Telluride programs, and I had never seen anything to this effect. And coincidence of coincidence, this person, whose name is Doug Mobley, and who is amazing, and shout out to Doug for being awesome. Doug Mobley was actually working as the intern that year, looking at videos of things as they were sent in. So Doug got to watch the pilot, which at that time was still being called Northwest Passage, got to see it like before anybody even at the festival did, and the people who saw it at the festival saw it almost a year in advance of it playing on television.
Wow.
And more than that, Doug got to write the program notes for it, and he sent me the program notes from
Holy shit!
Yeah, exactly, from the Twin Peaks, from the 16th Telluride Film Festival in 1989. So here is the program copy that Doug wrote. David Lynch has a kindler, gentler blue velvet for Bush's America. His special brand of organic unease now gurgles beneath the placid face of a northern Gothic town where health, industry, and death go hand in hand. His latest trip to the netherworld, co-written with Mark Frost, begins with the discovery of a plastic-wrapped body of a teenage girl and moves like blood chilled by fresh air, taking slow and perfectly natural turns on its mysterious course. The Alpine Lake community is a marvelously developed organism. At its cruel heart is a modern high school populated by 50s-style thugs and cheerleaders concealing secret lives. Kyle MacLachlan is the shrewd FBI man, effusive to a tape recorder named Diane, and gleeful about the local Douglas firs and cherry pies. It played with a short called Subject of the Picture by George Feitzgabel, who is a Swiss filmmaker. And in person at the Telluride Film Festival, because Telluride always requires that somebody come with the film, in person was Mark Frost and Michael Onkeen. So,
Holy crap.
I had no idea, so I find this super fascinating. So there's some real original kind of uncovery for two true Twin Peaks diehards. Thank you to Doug for sending that. That is awesome.
Holy crap. You'd been teasing this to me for weeks, but I had no idea it would be this awesome.
Well, good.
God damn.
Man, I wish I had been there. I can't even imagine what it would have been like. So, anyway.
I just want to say that the one time I went to Telluride, Kate won a trip to Scotland with Tilda Swinton. So,
and by one, Simon means I beat his hand into the air by like a split second and beat him, because we were both people who had answers to this trivia question, but I was just sitting slightly closer to the front than Simon. Oh, it is a travesty.
Kate,
if the world was a better
the
place.
entire course of my life could have been different. Okay.
Yes, I did get to meet Tilda Swinton, and she did invite me to her castle in Scotland. This was a real thing that really happened after I won two round trip tickets to London, because I knew trivia about Tilda Swinton. Simon also knew this trivia. Sadly, we did not end up going to Tilda Swinton's castle. They were out of town when we finally made it. But she was a lovely, lovely, sweet woman. I cannot say enough nice things about her. And not just because she is one of the few other people on the planet who understands how awesome Keanu Reeves is. But, anyway, this is a whole other story.
Enough about the bitter landscape of my regrets. And back to Twin Peaks. Yeah, let's start with the Orchid's Curse. This is actually a really eventful episode. It, of course, culminates with the raid on One-Eyed Jack's, which is extremely violent, much more so than I remembered, and features a lot of stuff before that, of course, with our good old friend Harold. I wanted to mention one little piece of trivia that a lot of Twin Peaks fans probably won't know previously or care about. Which is that the guy who plays Leo's defense attorney is named Van Dyke Parks. I presume no relation to Michael Parks. And he is one of the most legendary arrangers lyricists and to some degree songwriters in like contemporary music history. And I had no idea he was going to be showing up on screen. For those who don't know, I mean, he worked with everyone from the Beach Boys to much more recently Joanna Newsom on her East album. Like, has collaborated. Like, his main thing is string arrangements, but he also wrote some incredible records in the 70s, like Song Cycle. Look his stuff up sometime. It's super interesting and cool. And the fact that he shows up here in like a one scene cameo is very bizarre. I'm sure there's a story behind it that someone can tell us about. It does meaningfully connect maybe to the fact that there are so many musicians slated to show up in the new season of Twin Peaks, but maybe we shouldn't talk about that quite yet. Anyway, I just wanted to get that little bit of weird trivia that I freaked out about and that no one else will care about out of the way.
No, it's awesome. I mentioned Simon mentioned that piece of trivia to me earlier when I wrote him to say that I was really surprised to figure out that, like, I think when we mentioned the episode that was directed by Caleb Deschanel, when we were talking about it last season, I actually don't remember if we said this on the show or not, but we knew that Caleb Deschanel, as a cinematographer, is the father of the two actresses, Zoe Deschanel and I'm gonna forget the sister's name. What is the sister's name? Emily, Zoe and Emily Deschanel.
Yes.
We knew that he was their father. But I did not know that the actress in Twin Peaks who plays Donna Hayward's mother is married to him, or was married to him. I actually don't know if that still stands, but was at the time, and is their mother. So there's like, this Twin Peaks dynasty.
Right. Actually, that gives me an excellent segue to talk about more than trivia when it comes to Twin Peaks, David Lynch, and his whole deal. There's a lot of dynasties kicking around in the Twin Peaks verse. There's a lot of people related to other people, and that extends to the fact that you've got David Lynch's, the son, as it turns out, as I learned, making a cameo, as well as Jennifer Lynch when she was about 19, 20, writing The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, which I find totally fascinating because A, it's very, very unusual. In terms of major sort of TV or Hollywood projects to have this level of family involvement. And B, it seems to really meaningfully connect to the show, and obviously more broadly to Lynch's concerns in his other films and works. But in terms of, when we get scenes like, I'm already jumping the gun and getting into the next episode, which I apologize for. But, Audrey and her wrangling with what it is to have this newly complicated relationship with her father. I find it fascinating that Lynch has this, production model that is so reliant on these intimate connections more so than sort of, I guess, traditional professional vetting of players and writers. And meanwhile, the show itself seems to be really interrogating, like, are these family units really, is the American nuclear family really as wholesome a set of relationships as we're led to believe? And as with so many points that I make on the show, I don't really know where I'm going with this. But
well, I wanted to add some stuff about Jennifer Lynch as well, because I have been kind of fascinated by this whole question. Like reading The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, I think it's a point worth making that I think Jennifer Lynch really should be given some credit as kind of like an authorial presence in the second season of the show, because she was basically given free reign to write that book. Like, she approached them and said, I would like to write this book. And they said, sure. And I think they had conferred with her and they gave her, she knew who the killer was, but wrote around it, obviously. But yeah, she was sort of largely given free reign to kind of fill in this backstory for Laura. It wasn't, I don't think, I'm sure somebody will tell me if I'm wrong about this, but the story I've always heard is that she sort of did most of that on her own. And Frost and Lynch were sort of looking over her shoulder a little bit, but it was largely her. And then I find it really fascinating that she wrote a lot of this stuff that then inevitably ends up shaping what happens in the second season. And we'll see an example of that. I think it's in the first episode we're talking about today. The scene where, Donna sort of verbally is kind of seducing Harold and tells the story about Josh and Rick and Tim. That, for example, is that's a story that Jennifer Lynch invented for The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, and there you get Laura's version of it, and here you get Donna's version of it. But anyway, I think that's really interesting that the sort of 19-year-old daughter of Lynch is given that level of kind of influence. And again, to her credit, I don't think they expected the book to be nearly as big of a deal as it ended up being. That's one thing. The other thing I was going to say, again, for anybody who's read that book, find it kind of amazing that Jennifer Lynch, like, it's an intense read, that book. And, like, the idea that she was writing it for her father's television show is kind of intense. And then I've read a quote from her somewhere where she says she knows that Frost has read the book, but she said, she went on record saying, I'm not even sure my father has ever looked at it. Like, she was like, I would be surprised if he's ever looked at it. So there's clearly something there, but anyway, yeah.
Jennifer Lynch is a very, very interesting person, and I know that because I've seen some of her movies.
I've seen one. I've only seen Surveillance. I haven't seen Boxing Helena.
Or Hiss.
Hiss?
Do you know that one?
No.
Hiss. Okay, this is a story worth recounting for listeners rather. So Hiss was a movie that she made in India, and I believe that she was trying to essentially like circumvent the Bollywood system. And it was about a snake woman, and I would love to tell you more about it, except that I didn't get to see it because it was supposed to play at the Festival du Nouveau Cinéma maybe 8 or 9 years ago, which I was there in Montreal at the time to watch, among other films, but it was canceled at the last minute. It was pulled at the last minute, so I didn't get to watch it. However, there was a documentary made about the making of Hiss, and I keep pronouncing it that way, by the way, because it has like 4 or 5 S's at the end of it. And apparently she had a very frustrating time dealing with sort of the Bollywood system. And the documentary about the making of it actually looks more interesting potentially than the film is. And I really hope to see it sometime. But she's definitely a very interesting figure. Surveillance itself is kind of like a weird ersatz, like C-movie takeoff of a David Lynch film in a weird way.
Yeah, I did not like Surveillance very much. And I mean, I think I, dragged my husband to watch it or something because I was kind of fascinated with Jennifer Lynch, period. And I think, again, I've never seen Boxing Helena, but the famous story about it, right, is that she made this film with Sherilyn Fenn in the lead, and I think Julian Sands is the male actor. And it was reviled by, like, quote-unquote feminists. Like, there was a really strong reaction against it as that it was sort of this misogynistic film. And I'm mostly just interested. I would like to know more about this because I've never seen it. I've never dug that much into the politics of it, but I know that Jennifer Lynch sort of disagrees, but I haven't, I'm interested. Anyway, after she made that film, I think she had a very difficult time getting things made, which I'm interested. I wonder if that's why she ended up trying to work in the Bollywood system. I don't know. But Surveillance is not a great
No, it's not.
film.
I mean,
it's not a good film.
I'll say this for Surveillance. It's not boring.
Yeah, that is true. And it does have Bill Pullman, dark Bill Pullman, which is always fun. Bill Pullman is dark Bill Pullman. So.
Yes. I hope you're enjoying tangents this week because despite my earlier warning, we're totally embracing them. Anyway, one of my other favorite things about this episode, I actually have a lot of things about this episode that I like. Were you the only one who was shocked, even despite our previous conversation, when Cooper says he's been in town for 12 days?
Yeah, no kidding, right? Holy crap. I was like, oh my God, all of this stuff. So much has happened.
During which time he's been able to recuperate from a triple gunshot.
Yeah, no kidding. And also everything that's happened, like, in the lives of the parents of poor Laura Palmer, like, everything that's happened to Leela, like, in 12 days, I was like, oh my God, if this was not Twin Peaks, he would just be lying on a couch, like, weeping somewhere because it's only been 12 days. So, but, it is Twin Peaks, so that's what happens. So,
something that's really odd about this episode and these episodes in general, we've barely discussed Hank. Because frankly, I don't think he's the most interesting character the show has to offer, which I don't think is at all Chris Mulkey's fault. Is the fact that the cliffhanger of the previous episode had him being assaulted, which is never touched on in these episodes at all.
Oh, it's true, hey? Yeah, he just sort of is like, fine again.
He's fine. He doesn't bring it up to anybody. It's not like an issue. He's not like trying to figure out why he was beaten up or anything. Anyway, I just thought that was kind of interesting. We do get the return of Bobby and Shelley, which is great. I wanted to specifically hone in on obviously the scenes between Donna and Harold are a major part of this episode. I do think, as much as I do find Harold to be an interesting character, and the scenes where sort of Donna is seducing him and then recounting the story from the diary, those scenes are great. Lara Flynn Boyle is incredible in those scenes. Yeah. She's really, really great. She really manages to sell both like the earnestness and the duplicity, which is really, really difficult. But I have to say I was thirsting for a Lynch level power to that final sequence of that first episode when Harold essentially we see one of those Lynch style ruptures with him where he is betrayed and it's a very dark moment, and then we see this new dimension to him, but it just doesn't quite have the gravitas that it should.
Yeah. I can't remember because I didn't have time to review these right before we talked, but is it at the end of that episode where he puts he takes the thing to his face? Yeah, okay. Yeah, and you get the kind of awkward like Dutch angle, which is sort of meant to make everything look stranger, but it just sort of makes it look a little awkward or silly or something. Yeah. It's not great. And it is weird because the sequence with Donna, like even just leading up to it is really quite masterful, like really spot on, really perfectly done. I've always really found that scene kind of fascinating. I mean, I think again, it plays into something we've been talking about a lot in the last couple of weeks, but there's this idea of like these young women's kind of relationship to sexuality. I remember the first time I saw that episode, like her describing this story about being a 13-year-old girl and like, I don't know, a show giving that kind of space to like the desire of a young girl is not something that you see very often on television. I still think to this day it's not something you see very often, like taken seriously. I mean, sure, the idea of like girls having a crush or like whatever, like that's all over the place, but this idea of like desire is a real kind of thing and a dangerous sort of thing for a 13-year-old girl. Like I think that's a really fascinating thing. I think they do a great job with it. And
for better or worse, if that scene had come out today, we'd be dealing with think pieces left and right about like, oh, was what Donna described rape or like, because she is literally describing statutory rape in that sequence. She's 14, the guy's like 20. But you know, it's very much from her perspective. And it's also interesting that she doesn't describe it as like, oh, it was my first kiss. She describes it as it was the first time I fell in love, which is like pretty much the definition of unreliable teenager stuff.
Yeah, it's also really interesting to listen to Donna describe that scene after having read the version of it where you hear Laura's version of it from Laura's side of things, because it's shocking. Like Laura's version of it is entirely different than what you get. I won't describe it in detail, but it's a much more adult experience that Laura describes. So it's interesting. It retroactively makes Donna's experience seem very childlike, even as in the show it doesn't read that way, but compared to the diary it does. It's interesting. Anyway.
Right. And I have to say the writing in these scenes is really, really sharp too. And we can credit Jennifer Lynch. We can also, of course, credit the credited teleplay writer, Henry Pullman, who I assume has no relation to Bill Pullman, but at this rate, who knows? I love that exchange between him and Donna where she's trying to seduce him by saying, you know, there are things you can't get from books, and he replies with, there are things you can't get anywhere, which I think is actually one of the best lines in the entire series. Yeah. And a great line delivery too. It's a little bit too bad that I think the some combination of performance and staging kind of lets down the final moments of the episode, because up until then I think Harold is actually one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, he has, that is one of my I think that's a great line. And then it even continues, right, when he says something like, there are things you can't get anywhere, but we try to convince ourselves that we can find them in other people or something, which is like a great line. And then I also think, I actually can't remember if it's in this episode or the next episode, but another great line is the line where Harold says, it is the next episode, he says, you're interested in secrets or whatever, and the secret of, I'll tell you a great secret, I know the greatest secret or something, it's the secret of knowing who killed you or whatever. And for me, I think that's a genius line because it works as, you feel like it is almost a reference to something. Like my response was, is he quoting something? Like, is this the show quoting a film noir? Because it reads to me as a line that would fit so much in any number of kind of film noirs, right? This idea of the fatalism of the noir, like knowing where your life is going, and the doomed quality of these characters. And I don't know, a quick Google search did not lead me to believe that it was quote. I think it was just a line on its own, but it's still a wonderful line.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also worth mentioning that Donna's kind of an asshole in this episode.
Yes.
Especially, I mean, obviously there's the whole duplicity with her and Madeline, etc. But there's just like the whole forcing him, even before she's trying to get at the diary, she's like forcing Harold out into the light and like causing a seizure or something. Just like, come on, Donna, I know you're a teenager, but seriously.
Yeah. It also, there is some confusion for me still here about the kind of the structural writing of her character in these episodes particularly, because you get, like, I think even at one point Maddie says to her, don't you like this guy? Like, what are you doing?
That's a good question.
And she's like, yeah. And then the scene kind of ends, and you just never really get much of an answer to that. But I do find it, I mean, sure, for like dramatic purposes, I guess they just sort of revert to this idea of like Donna as Nancy Drew or whatever, and she's going to come up with some scheme to get things crazy. But I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem like she puts very much effort into maybe trying to convince Harold that the sheriffs need to read the thing. Like, even if the sheriffs came to the house and read the diary, like, at the house or something.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
I think there could have been more working out here before going the nuclear option of we need to steal the diary from him.
Right. Well, and it's also, it seems like she doesn't have any interest in getting it to the sheriff in this whole episode, in that whole episode. Like, it seems like she's much more interested in just, like, exploring this weird emotional space with Harold. And, like, I have to say that that Zizek quote that I inserted into the last episode and that we discussed ended up being very prophetic for this episode, when he's literally talking about how the plants are just like platforms for insects to come in and screw them. Which is, I'm quoting Zizek more or less verbatim here. So you know what? Zizek was totally on the money. I was wrong to doubt him.
Oh, we definitely get another like plant vagina sequence here, like an erotic, like whatever what are they called, orchids, like an erotic orchid encounter between the two of them there as well. So no, I think, yeah, the Zizek stuff, Sarah's point was very well taken too about all of that.
Yes.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think Harold in general is, I do really like him as a character. I think there's some great sequences. I don't think his end works as well as was maybe envisioned. And if you listen to like, there's quotes from the actor, and he sort of talks about how he wasn't thrilled with the way that storyline wrapped up, mostly because I think they were, like, he describes them having to do sort of last minute rewrites around that sequence where Harold catches them. And I think originally it was that he is trying to attack them, and like there was some pushback over this idea that he's so clearly a kind of non-violent guy, and then this gets transformed into him sort of attacking himself. And but yeah, I think there's some pathos we get next week's episode with him, which is an interesting part of that payoff, but I don't think these scenes work particularly well, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, as I said last week, I didn't remember anything about Harold or what happens with him. And I seriously think if the first episode had culminated with his actual suicide, I think that would have been much more effective. Like
this episode right here, you mean?
Yeah, like if he just literally used those very dull-looking garden claws or whatever they are. I'm not a gardener. They have a very obvious word for what they are, but I can't think of what they are.
I know what they're called too, and I can't think of it either. But yeah, you mean like if he had managed to take it in like cachet style, just like arterial spray it all over
just like tuck it behind his windpipe and pull it forward. Yeah, which would have been a little bit much for network television, I realize, but.
Like, he literally picks up the most ridiculous gardening implement around, and Donna and Maddie are like, oh, like, we're gonna get killed. And it's like, this guy really is not gonna.
He's not exactly Freddy Krueger, is he?
Exactly. Again, I stick by my assessment of he's Cam's older brother from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Not exactly the most threatening presence. Which I think is why maybe the actor is like, why are we writing this with me attacking them? Because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But, anyway, I do think there is something to this. I do think they do. It's an interesting and worthwhile idea.
Yeah,
this idea of the kind of betrayal of Harold Smith, I think, is a worthwhile thing. Yeah, I just think it stylistically it could have been done a little bit better. But I mean, overall, I really like the direction of that first episode, as we've said already, the scenes with Donna. But I think there are other really great things in The Orchid's Curse which are worth mentioning. I think. I like these sequences that are the courtroom sequences that take place in the Bang Bang Club or the Bang Bang Bar or whatever it's called. I just think there's something really inventive. Maybe this was the writer and less the director, but I think there's something inventive about this idea of it's a small town, and so they have to have a courtroom in the local, like, divey bar. I think it is kind of great. Like, it's the biggest, because, again, also, and this is one of these things that maybe just people forget, but in the pilot episode, there actually is a big enough space. This is where they hold the like information session where Cooper is telling people that there should be curfew and
you're
everything.
right.
Yes, like there is a big enough space. Of course, what that means is that they didn't want to rebuild that set or whatever in LA. But anyway, I do think it's kind of an inventive touch having it in the bar. I like these scenes of Leland sitting in the chair and Sarah Palmer having to like peek out from behind the awkwardly situated column or whatever to see what's going on in the courtroom proceedings. Like things like that. I think there's some interesting touches there.
Yeah, and I do like Shelley positioned during Leo's quasi hearing or whatever as the dutiful wife or whatever. That's a nice touch.
Staring at the giant like headshot of Eric DeRay.
Yes,
on
yes.
the stage.
These episodes, by the way, feature Eric DeRay's greatest performance.
Yeah, and it only gets better. It's all up here. It's all uphill from here with Eric DeRay.
I'm so sorry. If Eric DeRay's listening to this, I feel really bad. But
God, no, don't tell me that. I will like cry myself to sleep at night. I don't want to imagine Eric DeRay listening to us complain. Whatever. Now I feel terrible. Oh my God. Don't feel bad, Eric DeRay.
I'm so sorry. I know I feel bad for making you feel bad. It's just bad feelings all around. I also like the way that the prosecutor has this like, this big Law and Order style speech about about the town, and it's almost this meta moment where he's talking about the impact of these murders on the town, and the judge is like, all right, like we get it.
I know. Also, there's another version of that too, which is that Sheriff Truman gets up and gives his speech, kind of like sort of defending Leland. It's kind of a weird speech. It's like a character testimony, but it isn't really a defense. It's just like, yeah, everybody likes him. His family has been here for a long time. Is effectively the speech. Anyway, so you hear the sheriff's speech, and then when the judge is supposed to be giving his kind of rationale for why he's going to let Leland have bail and leave, we don't hear any of it. Like it's all kind of muted because you're this weird interchange with Andy, wanting to be a sketch artist or whatever takes precedence over
and sketching the back of Leland's head.
Exactly.
Which is actually a really great comic touch, I have to say.
It is true. There's another great scene. There's a great scene with Andy in this episode as well, which is the one, it's like sort of the middle of the episode where Andy is filling in for Lucy at the desk and he's covered in the stickies and he decides to he calls for his results, the test results about the sperm stuff, and he's shouting things like, I'm not just 3 men on a boat, I'm a whole damn town. Like, that actor, we haven't mentioned it really so far yet. I think Ricky talked a little bit about Andy, but we haven't mentioned Harry Goaz is the name of the actor, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but that's fine. The story is that he, God, and now I'm realizing I should have double checked this, but I know he was cast not as an actor who like came to the casting people, to Lynch through the casting director. He was cast because he was a driver that Lynch met. So I have to admit, so I don't know if Harry Goaz was trying to be an actor and he just was also a driver and this was sort of serendipitous, but I know that he met Lynch while he was driving Lynch and Lynch cast him from that. And so I don't know. I just have always loved that version of this story because we haven't really talked about it at all yet, but this, the fact that Lynch very famously does not cast people based on readings. Like he doesn't do traditional auditions where people have to come in and read for their characters. Instead, he'll often pick people based solely on a photo, and then they come in and we'll have sort of like a conversation with him and he'll just try to get a read on them as a kind of human, and then decide based on that because he thinks auditioning is cruel. And from everything I understand, auditioning is totally cruel. So this is sort of like one of those nice things about Lynch.
Right. As someone who has auditioned, I can tell you that it is cruel.
Yeah, it sounds miserable. So anyway, so Lynch doesn't like to put people through that, but for me, I find that Andy, Harry Goaz, is such a funny version of maybe somebody like James, our other poor punching bag actor, but James Marshall, where, infamously, I think Lynch's ability to choose people based on photos has historically worked so amazingly well, right? I mean, he broke people like Naomi Watts with Mulholland Drive, whereas she'd been in Hollywood for 10 years, 15 years, and couldn't get a break. Because she wasn't great at auditioning, and Lynch saw past that, and there's like this magical ability there. And clearly with somebody like Harry Goaz, like he is so perfect as Andy. Like, and I don't know how much of that is Lynch's kind of synchronicity, sort of magical ability to match a kind of non-actor with the right role, and how much of that is Goez's performance abilities, I'm not really sure. But then there's also the kind of downside of it, where you get people like James Marshall that I think maybe work to a certain point, but anything past that just stretches their performance abilities too far, and it doesn't work.
Well, and I don't want to get too far off course here, but like I feel like David Lynch's casting magic really highlights the fact that the entire casting process, the entire casting industry, I don't want to cast too many aspersions on the casting industry, but I think that a lot of the baseline assumptions about how casting works are kind of bunk. Like they're based on, keeping people employed and keeping certain assumptions going so that, our feeling on acting as a job and acting as, a task and a discipline stay intact. And I think a lot of that really just falls apart when you watch David Lynch's work and you realize that, everyone has something they can bring to the camera, and it's just a matter of lining that up correctly. I've always been of the opinion that there's very, very little, there's very, very few people who can't act. There's just poor casting. And
poor directing too.
And poor directing, absolutely. I think that that's borne out in the fact that he casts so many ostensible non-actors who are somehow just perfect. And again, that relies heavily on sort of Lynch and his collaborators' sense of intuition, or in some cases lack thereof, as it turns out.
I wanted to add one more thing, because I've been trying to get this in here since I don't know, maybe the pilot, but in response to this is something that I find fascinating too about Lynch as a director that, again, we haven't talked about, but is pretty well known to people who are into Lynch, is part of this, the way in which he engages people who are both professional actors and, from the non-actor kind of end of things, which is, that he doesn't go in for this discussion of like character motivation and creating a kind of like sensorial, emotional base that you're drawing from your childhood to like replicate how so-and-so feels in the scene. He doesn't take that tack. Instead,
AKA method.
It's not the method actor. It's not the kind of like psychological interiority creation of a character sort of thing. But instead, it'll often be that he'll give people both kind of tasks to do, which is a kind of more common thing in the history of cinema of like working with non-actors, is that you organize their work around doing things and sort of like with their hands and finishing tasks on screen. But anyway, so there's some of that from Lynch, but then there's also these things where he'll give people directions that are not specific to the scene, but are more like, God, again, inspirational is a terrible word, but are meant to kind of like unlock something for them. So for an example is, if you cast your mind back to the pilot when Ronette Pulaski is walking along the bridge, you get the shot of her kind of, stumbling across this bridge almost. And apparently the direction that Lynch gave to her was walk like a broken doll. And it's like, who would think of that? Like, this is Lynch's genius. Like, he doesn't need to say to her, you've been brutalized and your knee hurts. And like, it's none of that. Yeah. It's just give this kind of like really incisive, amazing material sort of visual image to someone, sonic image, that then allows them to unlock something from that. Like, I think it really speaks to the way in which Lynch, this idea of intuition, this idea of play, where he's able to open such things up without having to go to a certain kind of intellectualizing of it, I think is genius. Anyway.
Well, and I think that, when we talk about other people directing versus Lynch directing on this show, I think that points out sort of one of the unique challenges of mounting a show like this, where, Lynch has set up the framework where he's cast like, in some cases veteran actors, in some cases TV actors, in some cases, non-professional actors. And then you sick a set of writers and directors on that who don't necessarily have that his sense of intuition of how to work with people who don't come from that professional background. And I think that like it's when you think about how things maybe don't line up on certain episodes or with certain lines of dialogue or with certain characters, like it starts to make perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're definitely going to have to start talking soon about this question of what works that they set up from the beginning and what is starting to not work anymore. What is starting to fall apart is going to become, I think, a more and more pressing question as we go forward. These episodes still work, so let's talk about the good ones. Let's enjoy while it lasts.
Before we move on to Demon specifically, we of course have to talk about the assault on One-Eyed Jacks.
Indeed.
Which is actually was a much more sort of like tense and memorable sequence than I remembered. A few things I wanted to highlight. I have to say that Sheriff Truman's move with the ball and tape is smooth as hell. And I'm surprised I never saw replicated on like Justified or something. But I specifically I had totally forgotten about and was slightly taken aback by Coop punching Blackie's sister in the stomach.
Yeah, it's a little rough, that whole thing. And I don't know. It's like you get it. Like it makes sense, right? Because she's attacked him with a knife, so it's like, sure, it's justifiable. You know,
oh, 100%.
Fighting this woman off, but it just is so hard to watch him punching this woman in the stomach. It's not what you want to be watching Cooper do.
No, not really. I wish they'd come up with a better one-liner for Hawk than "you guys don't know how to keep a secret." I honestly wish he just said like "idiots" or something, but it works.
There's something a little weird too about that sequence where I guess, you know, these questions around the sort of law and orderness of it all, but like Hawk basically, he doesn't shoot him, but Hawk like stabbing a guy in the back effectively.
No, throwing a knife into his
back
yeah.
to like free these guys who have gone out of their jurisdiction to basically, you know, sort of do this like whatever. The legality of all of this is super dubious anyway, but I just like, for me, I'm never sure exactly how I feel about that. Like Hawk just sort of murdering this guy and then it being like we never need to talk about that again. I mean, we do, there is some follow up to Coop's role in all of that, and we do get it later. And even in this episode, I think you get Coop sort of saying things to the effect of, you know, this isn't the first time I've put people in danger over my need to do what I need to do. And I do love that sequence because I think it's, again, just one of those great small moments that you get between Sheriff Truman and Coop, where Truman is such a perfect match to Coop and saying, you know, you're not a bad guy, Coop. Like, don't give yourself such a hard time. There's just something very sweet in that interaction between them. But anyway. I had one more thing I wanted to mention about this episode, maybe before we move on to the next one too, which is just, again, the presence of Mr. Tajimura as a character. Jesus. Because I found out, I had no idea, this was like reading I did for these episodes, apparently it wasn't just that they thought they were fooling audience members, and I don't know, I'd be kind of interested to know if anybody who was a fan at the time, if they feel like getting in touch with us, to tell us if it was obvious to people that it was Piper Laurie or not. Because, you know, Piper Laurie's name had been scrubbed from the credits, she's not credited, and they created a fake Japanese man's name as the actor who is being credited with playing Mr. Tajimura. But apparently they even went further than that, and Piper Laurie wore that makeup on set all day and didn't speak to anybody when they weren't filming scenes. And this idea was that it was sort of to fool the other actors. Like, the actors were not to know that this was Piper Laurie, that this was a kind of a secret. And you can read her talking about this, and she thinks, like, maybe Kyle MacLachlan had figured it out, but not everybody else. And particularly, apparently, Jack Nance was, like, completely oblivious. Jack Nance plays Pete Martell. Yeah. That Jack Nance was oblivious to this, even though she was like, we're filming this scene where we're standing right next to each other, and he still didn't figure it out. So anyway, I just found that utterly bizarre. Like, my question is why? Why were the filmmakers doing this? Like, what on earth purpose could this serve? I don't understand that at all.
And by the way, if there are any like first-time viewers who are like following along episode by episode who hadn't figured that out, and we just spoiled that for you, like, I don't know what to tell you.
I mean, like, really though, it's such a ridiculous spoil. Like, it can't, like, oh man, I guess it makes sense that somebody might not have figured that out. I feel bad in that case.
No, seriously, don't feel bad. Anyone who hasn't figured that out, they're the ones who should feel bad.
I mean, it's so obviously her. Like, it's so obviously her. But anyway, so yes, apologies for that. But I was going to say, no, okay, I take it back. No apologies. You figure it out. But I was going to say that I think already with that kind of a story, like with this development of this sort of bizarre expenditure of energy to make Piper Laurie look like a Japanese actor on set, this to me, I think, already starts to speak to something that we will talk about maybe more after next week's episode. But think there very much is a narrative that's going to start to emerge around the kind of extra stuff in the show, which is this idea that the show starts to unravel because Lynch and Frost were forced to reveal Laura's killer. And were forced to kind of build things up to that reveal, which happens soon. And I think I've always maybe had a bit of an issue with that narrative being that simple. And I think there are things here that we can see are already kind of a problem. Like, for one thing, I think in these two episodes particularly, and even the last two before it maybe, some of the strongest stuff in these episodes is the stuff that is building up to the reveal of Laura's killer. Like, that is still really the heart of the show. And I think, it can always be this question of like, what is and what would have happened and et cetera, et cetera. But if we are imagining a fantasy version of Twin Peaks where Lynch and Frost were allowed free reign and never had to reveal Laura's killer or didn't reveal Laura's killer until the end of this season, it's not like the show in these early episodes had a great plan for what they were going to be doing instead. Right. You know what I mean? It's like we're already getting these like really baffling choices, like with Nadine and with Mr. Tajimura, and Nadine. It just doesn't, like, we can maybe keep talking about that later, but I think it's time to start pushing back against this narrative that the show only gets bad because they were forced to reveal Laura and Laura's killer.
So before we were pushing back against the idea that it gets bad started with season 2, and now we're pushing back against the idea that it only gets bad after Laura's killer is revealed.
Exactly. It starts to get slowly. Right. I mean, it's not like the Mr. Tajimura stuff, I don't care and I don't particularly like it, but it's also not like atrociously silly either. And Nadine's sequences are starting to get a bit goofy. I think maybe it's this episode or the next one where you get that weird scene where there's like a weird special effect as Nadine lifts up the fridge door that she's just sort of pulled off of its hinges. Things like that are a bit silly, but at this point, I still think it's not terrible either. Like, those scenes still kind of they work well enough within a larger framework that it's not like derailing the episodes or anything, but yeah.
So I guess we should now specifically talk about Demons, aka the arrival of Lynch himself.
Yeah.
Who's like, I really love the idea that like, even as like, you'll see over like the next few weeks of this podcast, like eventually the show's fortunes start sinking, but like Lynch just really enjoys acting. So he kind of doesn't care or something.
Yeah, Gordon Cole. I do find it kind of funny again with the sort of like extra textual stuff here, which is that the network is putting increasing pressure on Lynch and Frost to reveal Laura's killer. They were really unhappy about it and had been kind of on the record saying that from early on that they didn't want to do that, but were being told by the network in no uncertain terms that they sort of had to. And yet it's like here you get Lynch kind of showing up, like having, like a great time on the episode is again kind of a weird oddity to this narrative of them sort of fighting it out with the network. But yeah, Gordon Cole is a truly lovely character, and he only gets better going forward.
And I think it's really interesting that again, questioning this whole notion of expertise in acting. Lynch here's a guy who really hadn't done any on-screen acting until only a couple years earlier in that film we mentioned, like way back 4 or 5 episodes ago with Isabella Rossellini. And I gather just kind of got the acting bug. Was just like, I feel like doing it. This is like a fun thing I want to do. And you get that infectiousness in his performance. This is just a guy who, through his directing, knows what he has to do on screen and knows how to get things from people. It's this totally different route to eliciting good stuff on screen. That like I'm not an expert on the science of performance. Perhaps one day we can get one on the show. But like clearly a lot of what Lynch does sort of flies in the face of that expertise. Anyway, Demons. Once again, we have Leslie Lincoln Glatter behind the camera. Despite her expertise, I don't feel like she can really, she doesn't really rescue, that Harold Smith cliffhanger.
Yeah.
You were unclean. Like, oh, okay. We're going there with him. That's too bad. I unfortunately felt like I had to write him off as a character after that scene. But there's definitely some good stuff here this week, despite, as you mentioned, sort of the beginnings of certain aspects of the decline. But until I talk about other good stuff, I mean, I think we have to return to the topic of Josie. I think it's interesting that like possibly the most leering shot of Josie of the entire show comes from a female director.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. Yeah, I assume you were talking about the shot of her on the couch with her kind of back unzipped
where we
there.
start at her ass and move upwards. Let's
Yes.
be crass about it, since the show was.
It's true. And I also, because I just today listened to the episode where, the last episode we recorded with Sarah as a guest, and I think Sarah says something like, oh, wait, this is where we get her brother is introduced. And at the time, I meant to say, I don't think it's her brother. And I forgot to get to that point.
Keeping it in the family, man.
It's like, yeah, maybe now we know that it's probably not her brother. That whole relationship is very unclear to me. I mean, I've always found that sequence very strange. That, like, is it sort of I don't know. We don't have to parse through the details of it, but it reads very much as if she's been sort of forced into this sexual relationship with this guy because he has something over her. Or something. I don't know. It's very unclear, that whole thing with him.
My other question about, like, Josie in this episode is, like, has everyone fucked Josie? Or, like, does everyone just feel really comfortable with getting, like, right up in her face? Because, like, we get Ben in this episode. Previously, we had Hank, and obviously there's the sheriff, and probably some other characters I'm forgetting about. It's like, are we really supposed to understand that she's like been with everybody, or is this just like another level of the show's weird Orientalism where she's just like a possession that everyone can lay claim to at any moment?
I don't know. I mean, for me, I think this is complicated, and it's like I think I say this every week because the Josie character. As much as I think there is real problems with that character, and we've talked a lot about how she has very little agency and all of this stuff, I do still think it's maybe worth pointing out sometimes too that I think Lynch's general kind of like approach to the question of like centering women at the center of his narratives usually tends to maybe walk a line between giving sort of this clear space to kind of female centric sort of questions and narratives, but then also his fascination with what he's referred to, I think, as like a woman in trouble, which is also the subtitle of Inland Empire. But yeah, this idea that so many of his characters are women in trouble, and I think the Josie character, for me, there is some interest there, particularly in these sorts of episodes. We start to get this maybe going forward more. This idea that there is a female character that tends to sort of show up sometimes, and she is very much kind of, I think, loathed by a certain form of feminist thought. And this is the female character whose role is to be a kind of passive, almost punching bag. Like, this is this character, right? I mean, and like there's characters like the film Wanda by Barbara Loden, if nobody's seen it, is really amazing and is a really fascinating example of this. And I don't know, I think the Josie character is like this question of, why do we expect, like, this idea that we want the female character to have a certain kind of agency ends up being another way in which we tend to turn her into a punching bag, is like that it's already a problem that she isn't able to do more. And I think the fact that you have all of these scenes with Josie being perpetually kind of trodden all over by the men in the town, I'm not defending it by saying this was all intentional and there was some great feminist like intervention that they were making with Josie. But I do think it's important to not just automatically say that like this character is a terrible, bad example of a certain kind of feminist thought. I think it's important to acknowledge that there are plenty of women in the world who don't have access to that kind of agency, and a form of like passivity and subjugation is something that they have to deal with. And this doesn't make them any less of a kind of like worthwhile form of experience. And I'm not saying that's what you said, but this is something I've been trying to think about with Josie. And I don't know. I also think she gets to kind of have a bit of a showdown with Ben Horne in this episode, which is fun, right? Like that she's outsmarted Ben, and like that's fun, so.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting that like, a few years later, Joan Chen would end up directing a feature that is very much about, as I understand it, a central female character who is very much not someone who is permitted agency and is very much put upon for pretty much the entirety of her days. I don't really necessarily want to read too much into that. To move on to other aspects of Demons, I think we have to talk about We have to talk about Shelley and Bobby
Yeah.
and Leo. Because holy crap, those sequences with catatonic Leo in the house and the kazoo are some of the most insane of the entire series.
But they still work. I mean, I think we're definitely not, because there will be scenes later with Leo that will be questionable, but I think there is, Gladder here walks like a great line between a certain kind of goofiness that's already apparent, and this idea of Leo being, an invalid. There's already a certain kind of goofiness there, but she does a great job, like even just with that thing with the kazoo and the glasses where his head nods down and Shelley freaks out. And it is a genuine scare. Like, I remember that for the first time that happened. It really threw me. And I also think there's some great stuff in that scene where you have Bobby, who's doing most of the talking, kind of effectively listing all of the ways in which this sort of revelation in Leo's downfall it feels very justified, right? You know, Leo as the wife beater, Leo as the killer, Leo as all of these things, and you're like, yeah, Leo, you suck. And then it switches, right? Like Leo sort of nods down, Shelley freaks out, and it switches, and Bobby and Shelley very much switch then into this immediate mode of like apologizing and sort of realizing that this is actually really awful. Like, even though Leo is not a good guy and is a bad dude, that maybe, like treating him this way is not appropriate still. And so it sort of like speaks again to this thing is like, this is why you love Bobby and Shelley, right? Like yeah.
Because there's this whole history of Bobby being this tough guy who's actually really easily spooked. Like, and I think this is why Bobby is one of the best characters. Like, he actually has, there's been at least 2 instances of like just a little bit of prodding and he starts bawling. Like, he's really not the tough guy he appears to be. And, all it takes is like a slight sloop of the head from Leo, and he's back to, anyway. It's a great and very unusual sequence. I can't imagine how viewers at the time must have felt, considering how I now feel watching it in 2017. Another sort of very strong sequence, I think, comes right at the end, which is, of course, the one-armed man sequence. AKA Philip Gerard. Let's give him his full name. As he is, here's an interesting thing. They deny him his meds, which then ends up helping them in their investigation. So there's some more solid ethical police / federal investigation work.
A bit dubious,
I'll just leave that there. But shit, now I have to pull up his name too. Al Strobel as Philip is so great in this sequence. In again, not an easily executable sequence. I think this is one of the few non-Lynch directed sequences that sort of accesses that level of sinister evil that we hope for out of Twin Peaks at its darkest. Yeah,
agreed. I think this sequence to me, like if you asked me to sort of remember off the top of my head which sequences were kind of the quote Lynchian sequences in the show, I would remember this as one of them, even though it is not a Lynch directed sequence. But I don't know. I think it's masterful here. Like the use of the sound effects with the kind of manipulation of Strobel's voice, so that you get something like a kind of echo of what you hear out of Bob in the sequence that ended the first episode in the second season, where you get Bob in the train car and this sort of manipulated, kind of reverberated voice. You get the same thing from Philip Gerard, which then sort of kicks you into this sort of second space, right? This like mystical space of Twin Peaks. And I just think the writing here is fantastic too. Like some of the lines that he gets where he's describing Bob, and he says something like, he is Bob, eager for fun. He wears a smile. Everybody run. It just gets at this idea of the way in which these characters of this other mystical space talk is almost like childhood, like rhymes or something. It's like very childlike, which makes it all the creepier. Like the fact that they exist at this sort of childish level, I don't know. I find that terrifying.
Yeah. I wanted to mention also, since I meant to mention this when we were first talking about the sequence, but I do find it interesting that through Leo, we get more sort of infirmity and disability sort of creeping into the show. What I feel about that, or what I think, I haven't quite parsed yet. I just wanted to mention that so that perhaps I can parse it later. Before we sort of ended, which we should be doing soon, I know, it seems like we rushed here, is I wanted to return to the IRC archives before we... I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that very soon, and by very soon I mean next week, we learn the true identity of Laura's killer. And this is something that had already been teased as of when they were airing the first episode that we're reviewing this week. They were already teasing that 2 weeks from then they would be telling people who killed Laura. And so, of course, the IRCs were firing off. Everyone was giving their opinions. And I wanted to read, in particular, from November 10th, 1990, Diarmid and his take on who killed Laura. And I'm not going to read all of this, but I will read some. And he says, Ben Horn did it. Here's the scoop. 1. Ben rests at the center of all the evil networks in town: prostitution, murder, fraud, arson, adultery, drugs, etc. Ben obviously takes great pleasure from his many vices. Bob feeds on pleasure or fear. 2. Fire walks with Ben. In the last episode, he drinks a toast to his office fire, and there were a number of extreme close-ups of Ben lighting his cigar. Not to forget the burning of the ledger scene with his brother Jerry. Quote, "We have to burn something. Where are those hickory sticks?" Also, Ben was instrumental in having the mill burned down. If we look at the show as, at some level, a struggle between wood and fire, then Ben is on the side of fire, and therefore evil.
A struggle between wood and fire.
Yeah. 3.
Sorry.
3. Our hypothesis is that the Great Northern Hotel is built on an ancient and sacred Indian site. We are way out on a limb here, and we know it. The hotel's decorations are littered with totem poles, Northwest Indian paintings, and a statue of an Indian chief in Coop's room. Also, remember in the first season that Ben's mad son wore an Indian headdress. Ben's desk sits in front of an Indian painting of an evil-looking owl. Anyway, this goes on for like a lot longer. I wanted to once again indicate to people the level of conspiratorial thinking going on as the show is airing. So as you listen to our conspiratorial thinking and our deep theories on what the show's doing, I hope you know that even at the time this was going on.
True. I wish I could, go back to when I was first watching Twin Peaks on sort of VHS and crack open my 18-year-old brain or whatever and find out if I had a theory about who killed Laura Palmer. I don't remember particularly worrying about it or something. Maybe it's that I knew I would have kind of quicker access to the episodes or something than having to watch it a week apart. But I don't remember being particularly concerned by it. I mean, I thought it is Ben. I don't know. I don't actually remember at all. But do you remember having a theory?
I think I already knew the first time that I watched it.
You
so
did.
It wasn't really a problem. I mean, it's too bad you weren't recording a podcast at the time.
God, no, Simon. Believe me, you don't want to hear 18-year-old Kate rambling about Twin Peaks.
I would literally, I would kill a close relative to hear a podcast by 18-year-old Kate. I really would.
God. Oh man, that is very sweet of you. And if there's anybody out there listening to this who used to be a client at Sneak Preview Video where I worked, they probably remember having to listen to 18-year-old Kate talk about movies.
If there are any clients of Sneak Preview Video listening to this podcast, you're officially invited next week, just so you know.
Oh, that's lovely. That's very nice.
Okay.
Yes. Anyway, so no, I think, these are 2 solid episodes, and I'm very excited to talk about next week's episode when we're going to just focus on just one episode. We're going to give it space to breathe. So
yeah, which will of course color all episodes that came previous, and we will try not to trip over ourselves. So I am on the Twitters at Hollow Minds. As I've cautioned many times before, I will probably yell at you about politics if you do follow me. Kate, you are at Cinnament, CINEMENT. And that's it from us. Thank you all for listening, and we will be back next week. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, exactly. Fuck Guess. Yeah, I don't care. Guess, we don't need him.